Welcome, America. We've got Governor Johnson here to have a discussion on various topics. And Governor Johnson has a lot of experience, for most people probably know, but he was eight-year governor of New Mexico, reelected overwhelmingly, cut the state budget, turned a deficit into a surplus, and now he's running for president to do the same for America. Governor Johnson?
Great, thank you very much. I guess we'll just, Clarke is with us this evening, Clarke Cooper from Washington, D.C. Clarke, great to have you on. But I guess we can get started here. Sherry Hooper, going to start off with what's your favorite all-time Christmas melody? I guess it would have to be 12 Days of Christmas, just because I enjoy seeing if I can carry all 12 days with one breath at the very end. I guess that's why I like it so much. That's the first question. I've been saying the last several days that I hate to paint in broad brush strokes, but I think the majority of Americans describe themselves as fiscally conservative and socially liberal. And I think I fall within that category, broadly speaking. And I think that's a message that really is about equality more than anything else. As President of the United States, I am promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. I'm promising to veto legislation where expenses exceed revenue. I say this from the standpoint that I believe that we're going to experience a monetary collapse unless we actually fix our spending. So this is really to save the country. The notion that people will go without, I think that that needs to be answered with doing with a little bit less is better than doing with nothing at all. And I think that's what we're going to end up with unless we address this. And then lastly, as President of the United States, I am promising to advocate throwing out the entire federal tax system and replacing it with the fair tax, which in my opinion would really reboot the American economy for the next 100 years. No income tax, no corporate tax, no more withholdings from our payroll check. It would make American goods and services 23% more competitive. And if in a zero corporate tax rate environment, the private sector does not create tens of millions of jobs in this country, I don't know what will. So let's see. Clarke, you got some statements here you'd like to start off with? Thank you so much for joining this evening.
Well, Governor, yeah, thank you for having me. And log cabin members in New Mexico have a very important question for you. Red or green?
Green. And for those that don't know what that means, that's red or green chili, and that's a question that gets asked to you when you dine in New Mexico at any Mexican food restaurant, red or green, and I'm always the green guy.
All right, excellent. So that was actually emailed by some members in Albuquerque and Santa Fe. I thought there was some consistency there that that you had to answer on that one first start.
You know what, Clarke? I'll also add that as governor of New Mexico, I vetoed a bill that made that the state question, and I vetoed that bill because what are you as legislators doing? Taking hours worth of time to debate a bill on whether or not it should be red or green. So I vetoed that legislation, trying to set a precedent that how about spending your time in meaningful ways as opposed to a law red or green chili.
And speaking of spending time on the floor, your take, Governor, on what's happening right here in Washington. You talked about the fair tax. A lot of folks here on this forum know that you were a major job creator when you were governor in New Mexico, and that there was a budget surplus when you left office. A big frontline issue here, not only with our members and log cabin Republicans across the country, but what's happening on the radar screen is the legislation that's coming before Congress next week. The middle class tax relief. There's a package of bills that are tied to that. That's unemployment insurance, some job creation initiatives. It seems, finally, this is where they're moving away from talking about postage stamps and coins, which is the congressional version of the red or green state motto issue. But would love to hear more. I know our members are myopically focused on what's going to be potentially a battle royale next week on regarding middle class and taxes.
Clarke, I really think that if we want to do away with lobbyists in Washington, that we need to enact the fair tax, which really does away with all existing federal tax, does away with the IRS. I think that Washington has its hand out, and when I say Washington has its hand out, I think politicians have their hands out for groups or individuals or businesses, corporations that pay for special loopholes, pay for a special place in line that makes this country unfair, as opposed to equality for all. And I think what government can provide is a level playing field, and that with our existing tax system, really what we've done is we've created an unlevel playing field that what I'm hearing coming out of Washington really is perpetuating this, a continuation, if you will, rather than getting at the heart of this, which is tax reform that I advocate should be the fair tax, that I believe it is, as the name implies, it's fair. The more money you make, the more money you will consume, and it will also promote savings. It's one thing for us to borrow money for the money that we don't have. It's another thing to print money, which is the problem that we do have. About over the last year, up to 70% of the money that we're spending for ongoing government expenditures are literally money that's being printed out of thin air. And the result of that, at some point in the future, is going to be inflation. In my opinion, at some point in the future, it will be a monetary collapse. And a monetary collapse is where money ends up being worth nothing. And it's not anything that's going to be announced. A week from Thursday, we're going to have a monetary collapse, so go out and spend all the money that you have now on goods and services, because that money won't be worth anything next Thursday. Next Thursday is just going to end up happening unless, in my opinion, we balance the federal budget and make real inroads in cutting spending.
So, Governor, you're suggesting, and you're not the only one, we have some big allies in our organization. Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, for example, is a huge proponent of the balanced budget amendment. But it sounds like you're describing an apocalyptic kind of Weimar Republic scenario that could befall us at any given time.
I believe that. I do believe that, and it's not predictable, and I don't believe that we're immune from the mathematics of continuing to spend more money than what we take in. I just think that we need a bolder approach to tax reform in this country, to job creation, and now I'm back to the fair tax. If in a zero corporate tax rate environment, the private sector does not create tens of millions of jobs, I don't know under what scenario they will do that. In New Mexico, I had a great record when it came to job creation, but my response to that when I was governor was, you know what, government doesn't create a single job. What government can do, and what I think it did in New Mexico, is that there was a certainty when it came to rules and regulations. And then when it came to laws being passed, I think business in New Mexico went to bed knowing that it wasn't going to get any worse, and that proposals were really on the table to make things a lot better. I think that same certainty could exist in Washington today, and I'm just going to say that I don't think it exists. A balanced budget amendment is not the answer if the balanced budget amendment is something that's going to happen in 15 or 20 years. A balanced budget needs to happen now, and that's back to my promise, is to submit a balanced budget to Congress, promising to veto any legislation where expenditures exceed revenue, And yes, they'll have to override my veto, but I just suggest that spending will be lower in that scenario than any other possible scenario that you could present.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't know if you've seen, there's questions about the debates. As you know, the folks on this forum are big supporters of getting you into the debate formats, and that's been a frustrating issue for you. Have you been invited to the Trump debate?
At this point, I have not been invited to the Trump debate, hoping to get an invitation, and I see that's a question here from Charlie Froman. At this point, I've not been invited to any of the other remaining debates. That's something that we're really pinning our hopes on, is to be able to get in the remaining 5 debates. I have been excluded from 14 out of the 16 debates, and I think that has had a self-fulfilling prophecy that if you're not in the debate, how are you even a candidate? It's really hard to raise money when the person on the other end of the phone says, hey, Gary, I like you, I like what you've got to say, but I'm looking at a poll here where your name is not even on the poll. That has really been hard to overcome. I think the Republican Party could have really stood up and said, look, if you're going to have as a criteria showing a certain percentage of votes in XYZ poll, that at a minimum, Johnson should be in XYZ poll as opposed to not being in XYZ poll and having XYZ poll determine whether or not you're in the debate or not. That's just not fair. Herb, you're up. And I am not hearing Herb, but I do have the text here. Do you believe in getting rid of the IRS and the Fed? And if so, how long do you think it would take? Herb, regardless of whether or not it happens or not, I think that you have to have a president that's going to advocate doing these things. So ending the Federal Reserve is something that the president should advocate. Eliminating the IRS, throwing out the entire federal tax system, throwing out the income tax, throwing out withholdings from your payroll check. I think, and I base this on my experience as governor of New Mexico, I think when you advocate the right things, that public opinion, the dialogue, the discussion, the debates that go along with your advocacy of things that are right end up making change in the long run. That was my experience as governor of New Mexico. I can't promise that any of these things are going to happen if elected president, because it would require legislative cooperation. But what would the American people be shouting if I were elected president? They would be shouting that we want tax reform. They would be shouting that we want a balanced budget. I think they would be shouting that we want somebody that's going to have starch in their underwear to veto spending that exceeds revenue.
On that theme, Governor, you've probably seen some other questions down here that are follow-up to what Herb is asking, and some of them do touch upon generationally. A number of log cabin members are Generation X or younger or millennials, and we often hear in forums concern about the ability, the solvency of entitlements. And so back to what you're talking about, a balanced budget, and everyone sharing the so-called shared adversity or shared burden. Your thoughts about reform. I know that you have positions out there, but I don't know if everyone here is familiar with where you stand on entitlement reform.
Let me just address Jared LaRock's question here, text question first, which is, would you have a full audit of the Federal Reserve? Absolutely. What is needed when it comes to the full Federal Reserve is just full transparency, and an audit would provide that, in my opinion. Abolishing the Federal Reserve would bring about 100% transparency. We need to stop printing money. That's really the crux. And by balancing the federal budget, we still might have to print money, but by enacting the fair tax, I think that that's going to promote savings to the point where perhaps the printing of money goes away. I am promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. That means addressing entitlements. When it comes to Social Security is not enacting the fair tax. Social Security will not be something that gets paid for by you as the employee or your employer matching it. That will come out of the proceeds of the fair tax. The fair tax does away with all withholdings completely. But to make Social Security solvent into the future, I think it's very simply a combination of raising the retirement age, means testing, changing the escalator that's built into Social Security from the wage index to the inflation rate. Social Security as a problem is small in comparison to Medicaid and Medicare. When it comes to Medicaid and Medicare, as governor of New Mexico, I reformed Medicaid in New Mexico. We took it from a fee-for-service model to a managed care model. We basically gave every citizen in New Mexico my health insurance policy as governor of New Mexico. We saved a lot of money, and we set up much better healthcare networks to be able to meet even the rural most New Mexicans' needs. I believe that as governor of New Mexico, if I would have been given the delivery of Medicaid in New Mexico, if I would have been given that responsibility, and if the federal government would have done away with all the strings and all the mandates associated with how I had to spend the money for Medicaid and given me 43% less money, I believe that I could have effectively overseen the delivery of health care to the poor in New Mexico with 43% less money. I believe that I could do the same thing when it comes to Medicare. Right now, Medicare, very simply, is a fee-for-service model nationwide. Just change that to managed care. But if you give Medicaid and Medicare back to the states, 50 laboratories of innovation, 50 laboratories of best practice, I think you'll have just that. I think you'll have some amazing success that'll get emulated. I think you'll also have some spectacular failure that'll get avoided because we're all so competitive. But if we don't reform these entitlements, we're going to all find ourselves with nothing. So on the negative side, this is we need to cut Medicaid and Medicare, but on the plus side, we can do it, and if we do it, we'll all be left with, in my opinion, a safety net that will truly deliver health care to those in need. But we have to have reform. We can't continue to spend as much money, as much more money than what we're taking in, or we're going to find ourselves in a monetary collapse.
Governor, would that include also entitlements for military benefits as well for retirees? And of course, there's its own version of socialized medicine in the VA.
Well, I'm asked about a balanced budget and a 43% reduction in really all federal spending. Well, that wouldn't be all federal spending when it comes to veterans and veterans benefits. And these are promises that have been made and need to be kept, and certainly that would be health care, whatever aspect of health care that would involve for any veteran that has served this country and paid a price to serve this country. So in that context, but can we deliver goods and services more effectively in every single category? My experience as governor of New Mexico is the answer to that is an overwhelming yes. There is no area of government that can't be improved. Improvement being the notion that you can deliver better products and better services for lower prices, or at a minimum, same goods and services for less money. Charlie, you're up.
Governor, if you were invited to the RJC foreign policy debate that occurred last week, how would your views have differed from the frontrunners, Speaker Gingrich and Governor Romney?
Well, I come from the belief that first of all, we need to reduce our military spending by 43%. It's my opinion that the biggest threat to our national security is the fact that we're spending so much more money than what we're taking in, and we're going to find ourselves a la Russia in the midst of a monetary collapse. We're going to find ourselves with nothing. So I come from the contention that we can provide a strong national defense for this country and still cut military spending by 43%. The operative word being defense as opposed to offense, as opposed to nation building. I just think there is unintended consequence for all of our foreign interventions. Iran is a great example. Iran's only concern a decade ago, 12 years ago, was Iraq. That was their only concern. Now that we've taken out Iraq and Saddam Hussein, Iran is arguably raising its head. I do not believe there's a military threat from Iran, but we should be vigilant to a military threat, that we have the military surveillance capability to see something like something like nuclear weapons being developed or tested, and we can deal with those effectively in the future. But that is something, in my opinion, that does not exist today, that military threat, and that we should get out of Iraq and Afghanistan immediately. Afghanistan, great example, in my opinion, of military action that initially was totally warranted. We were after Al-Qaeda, and after 6 months of being in Afghanistan, I think that we wiped out Al-Qaeda, but that was 10 years ago, and we're building roads, schools, bridges, highways, and hospitals in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places in the world, and I think we have those same needs here in this country. So I think my views differ significantly in the fact that out of the worldwide dollar being spent on military spending today, 52 cents of that dollar is being spent by the United States, and we're 5% of the world's population. By contrast, China is spending 9 cents out of that dollar, and on the back of a napkin, I've calculated that the interest that we're paying China on the money that they've loaned us basically pays for their military, which is kind of sobering. Armand, you're up.
So, can you talk about you say that in kind of a recession government spending and
Well, I think that it is what we can control is cutting spending, and I really believe that by enacting the fair tax, that in conjunction, the fair tax, by the way, is revenue neutral, so we still need to cut 43% from government spending, but that by doing this, and there certainly might be an initial reaction to the cutback of that much government spending, but what we're going to find ourselves with, in my opinion, is just a reboot of the American economy, and wherever we start out from that point, that it will be a real recovery, as opposed to what I consider to be picking winners and losers, and the fact that this country is dealing it out unfairly. This country is up for sale, and it's being bought. Brian,
there was talk about that at the RNC fall meeting where I last saw the governor.
No, I don't have a decision, but I am considering the Libertarian nomination. I feel like I'm delivering a message here, that it's all about the message, that it's always been about the message, and that by delivering the message, by being on stage, if you will, in 16 out of 16 debates, that maybe the world changes a little bit because the issues get talked about, they get discussed, they get debated. I've been excluded from that debate. I think that this is a message that is not being heard, and I don't want to say that Ron Paul isn't delivering this message, but it's not just one. I'm a messenger. I think he is. I think it's about that it is first and foremost about the message and not the messenger, and that if it gets talked about enough, that we can change the world a little bit. But being excluded from the process, I feel like I've been abandoned by the Republican Party. I've been a Republican my entire life, but here potentially is an opportunity to continue to talk about a message unedited, not any different going forward. So maybe maybe we do change the world a little bit yet going into the general election. Ty, I think you're up.
Awesome.
Hi.
Yeah, my question was about, we all saw kind of a big GLBT rights moment was Hillary Clinton and Obama pledging to consider a country's GLBT human rights record when giving them financial aid. What's your stance on that?
Well, it's the federal government wielding a club that I think they're entitled to wield the club. I like the directive. I like the notion that they're wielding this club to bring about compliance, if you will, for gays, equality for gays. The federal government does this in all categories. I mean, they do this when it comes to highways. They do this when it comes to health care. They do this when it comes to education. And that is that they hold a club out over all the states, as they do, obviously, foreign governments receiving foreign aid. I'm opposed to foreign aid completely. I think the notion that we're borrowing 43 cents out of every dollar and then giving it away to foreign countries, I think that's a little crazy. I distinguish between foreign aid and military alliances. I think that military alliances are really key to be able to provide a strong worldwide defense against terrorism and still cut military spending by 43%. But I applaud Secretary Clinton and Obama for bringing pressure, if you will, for a good human rights outcome.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared, you're up.
Hey, sir, how's it going? I'm a service member for the United States Navy. Recently found out about you, and I'm starting to become a supporter. So you said that you could decrease the government by 43% the spending. I'm wondering if you believe in that as decreasing the size of our military in order to save money.
Yes, I think that is part of the equation. And when you talk about a 43% reduction in military spending, what you're talking about are those in uniform. You're talking about the civilian support staff that goes along with that. You're talking about research and development. And, we shouldn't be fighting the prior wars. We should be looking ahead and determining what it's going to take to win a future war. And it's not in the past. It's reducing the number of nuclear warheads from 2,300 to 500. My entire life, I've believed that we don't need to blow up the planet 9 times over, that maybe 5 times would do it. And it's extricating ourselves from the foreign involvements that we're in, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya. It's also reducing our military presence, our bases, our footprint, our military footprint around the globe also, all under the general heading of, yes, we can provide ourselves with a strong national defense and still cut military spending by 43%, believing that this is the biggest threat to our national security is the fact that we're printing money to cover these obligations, which is going to result at some point in a collapse to our monetary system.
Governor,
well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Governor, I want to reemphasize what you just said, because that is something that other leaders, those in uniform, have even made comment on, and it's very apropos following Jared's question that the economic condition of our country is a national security issue. And imagine that there are a number of, at least our members, we focus on the national security portfolio. I'm a service member myself, so yeah, I would like to hear more. You elaborate more about that, because that has been opined often in the debates, off the debates, even internally in some of the presidential campaigns about making it a national security issue.
Very good. Juanita, you're up.
Good evening.
Nice to see you, Governor. Obviously, there's been a lot of speculation as to whether or not you're going to stay with the Republican Party, or you're going to maybe move over to the Libertarian Party. Can you tell us why you have in the past associated yourself with the Republican Party? I understand that Jeffersonian Republicans are far different than the Republicans as we know them today. But I'd be interested in hearing why you have chosen the Republican Party in the past.
Well, I believe that the fastest growing segment of the Republican Party are those that are libertarian leaning. And in choosing being a lifelong Republican doesn't mean that I've always voted for Republicans. But the notion here is that I think this is the fastest growing segment of the Republican Party are those that are libertarian leaning. And I really think that unfairly I've been excluded from being a voice at the table to be able to articulate to other Republicans what it is that they should really be concerned about. I think the majority of Republicans are, and I use this broad stroke, I think the majority of Republicans are fiscally conservative and socially liberal, and I use that with a broad stroke. I think that the majority of Americans are in that category. I think when you take the social conservative notion of Republicans trying to cast themselves on all of the Republican Party, I think that's perhaps the main reason why the Republican Party is losing membership. Democrats are losing membership also to what the category of independent. So I think I'm speaking on behalf of the majority of people in this country. I think I'm speaking on behalf of the majority of the Republican Party, but I'm being excluded. I am being excluded. And right now, is the Libertarian Party really the voice of most Americans? And yes, I think that they are. I wish I could. I wish Republicans would understand this and be given a chance. But like I say, I don't think I didn't leave the Republican Party. I think the Republican Party has abandoned me on this, and I think the Republican Party is abandoning a lot of the American electorate. Perhaps the Libertarian Party is more in tune with the American electorate than any other party at the moment.
Juanita, this is Clarke Cooper. The governor's salient points about majority of self-identified conservatives or Republicans especially rings true with those voters under the baby boomer generation, Generation X, especially the millennials. And I don't know if the governor knows this, but the College Republican National Committee, the CRNC, in 2009 decided to get recalibrated and refocused on conservative tenet of individual liberty, individual responsibility, which Log Cabin goes for, and stand away and walk away from social issues. So the college Republicans, which become the young Republicans, which become the adults in the room, 2 years ago walked away from social issues, and that is a huge barometer within the broader conservative movement. The message that divisiveness doesn't win. Politics is about addition, and as Haley Barbour used to say, and is very applicable to what the governor just mentioned to Juanita, is that purity is the enemy of victory, and we're paying the price with people becoming independent, as the governor noted, and that's a demographic that cannot be denied. It's not just in polling. All you have to do is go to your county registrar to see those changes.
Thanks, Clarke. Greg Good has a text question. Why is Congress trying to pass indefinite detention for U.S. citizens? What is your view? I think that Guantanamo, although the fact is from a cost-benefit analysis, Guantanamo should probably stay open just because it fulfills a need to be able to have imprisonment outside of our borders. That's one thing. But what we need to close Guantanamo down for is torture, and we need to close the practice of indefinite detainment for, I think, any worldwide citizen, not just U.S. citizen, but the notion that Congress is going to pass indefinite detention for U.S. citizens without being charged, I think that's outrageous. I think that's why we've fought wars, and I could not be more opposed. Ryan Dunkerley.
You spent a lot of time talking about getting federal spending under control, but there seems to be a larger imbalance in our financial sector at large. Do you think that the federal government should be involved in trying to solve that issue? And if so, how?
Well, so, and if I don't hit this on the head, Ryan, please chime in. But, you know, there have been no criminal prosecutions on Wall Street. That may be due to the fact that there was really no criminal intent. What there was there was some incredibly bad decision-making that, in my opinion, should have been rewarded with failure. And I have to tell you, I think these guys would have rather sat in a jail cell than lose all the money that they should have back in 2008. Well, that's where government should not have gotten involved. Government should not have bailed out Wall Street. I share in the outrage that they get bailed out for really bad decision making, and they're still giving out bonuses to themselves. This is outrageous. And this is what government, and I base this on my having been governor of New Mexico, this is where good government is easy. It's not difficult, and the easy is that government can provide a level playing field for all of us to be able to achieve the American dream, which in my opinion is if you're going to work hard and innovate, then you will have a success. But the cards are stacked against us, and it's been a political card stacking that's occurred because politicians get paid for being able to dole out loopholes, being able to dole out special benefit, and that's exactly what they do. That's the basis for lobbyists. Enact the fair tax, and I think that you take giant steps toward this notion of equality, which is what I think presidential candidates right now should be talking about.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Governor, in a follow-up to Ryan's question, you mentioned lobbyists. Regarding transparency and accountability in your administration, you had it in Santa Fe. Could you elaborate for folks online about how you would apply your, as president, transparency and accountability in the White House?
Well, first of all, accountability and transparency is just easy when it comes to dialogue, that you are honest, that you tell the truth, that you make yourself accessible, that there is transparency. I think it's exciting. It was easy to actually implement. I had an open door after 4 policy in New Mexico where I met with any citizen in the state the 3rd Thursday of every month, starting at 4 in the afternoon, going till 10 o'clock at night on 5-minute increments. I thought that was good government, and I was able to find out areas where government really infringed on freedoms and of people in New Mexico, where bureaucrats, where rules and regulations met the road, if you will, when it came to individuals, and how oftentimes that adversely affected individuals, not for anyone's benefit at all, really just a capricious action on the part of government. So you can make a difference. Carrie has written a text question, which is, how would you deal with the infringement of liberty by TSA, Department of Homeland Security, the Patriot Act, and now the NDAA? Well, I vetoed 750 bills while I was governor of New Mexico. I had thousands of line items. That may have been more vetoes than all the other governors in the states combined. How would that attitude have affected federal government if I would have been president of the United States? I would not have established the Department of Homeland Security. I think that it's incredibly redundant, that it hasn't made life any safer in this country at all, and that it's just added a lot of time and a lot of money in what we all have to put up with. I would have never established the Transportation Safety Administration. I would have left airport security to the airports and to the airlines. And I dare say today that airline or airport security would be as safe and less intrusive. The Patriot Act, we continue to have our lives infringed upon by government. Government is taking more and more steps to look out after us from cradle to grave, and this is the opposite direction that they should be taking. The founding of this country was based on liberty and freedom, and in the name of saving us from terrorism or drugs or what have you, we continue to have our civil liberties eroded on a daily basis, and it's getting worse. It's not getting better, and this is what this movement is all about, is give us a level playing field, make government equal for all, and then stand back and see the benefits of that. So enact the fair tax, and let's reboot ourselves going forward. Let's become more concerned with equality and freedom and liberty than we are with security, because security is really a myth. It just costs us a lot of money, and it's all politically motivated to get politicians reelected as opposed to actually delivering on the promises. Ethan, you're on.
Hi, Governor Johnson. It's Ethan from Pennsylvania. I, like a lot of people who have been following your campaign, am a Ron Paul supporter, and I'm just wondering if you could tell me what, if any, differences there are in your platform versus the Good Doctor.
Well, I think, first of all, I think we're both delivering the same message, that it is about the message. It's not about the messenger, and I'm sure Dr. Paul would agree with that. The difference is, I guess, I am not a social conservative. I think that Dr. Paul is. And I think when it comes to resume, just the fact that the difference between a congressman, where Dr. Paul has registered some very principled no votes over the years, been the only no vote in Congress. I've probably vetoed 100 pieces of legislation, did veto 100 pieces of legislation in New Mexico, where the vote in the legislature was 117-0. And the administrative reality of dealing with that, as opposed to a principled no vote from Congress, quite different. But I don't know if the platforms really differ that much. It is about the message, and I've always maintained that if people in this country could hear it in stereo as opposed to monotone, maybe it would gain a little more traction. I wish. Apparently, the powers to be have decided that this should only be a monotone coming from the stage, when I think it goes way beyond stereo. I think this is the growing segment of the Republican Party and the sentiment of the country, and that ultimately we will see change. But I was asked to endorse Dr. Paul in 2008. I did that. And let's see these issues advance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Governor, you're not going to tell folks this, and they need to hear this, is that when you did speak at the RNC in October, this autumn, and of course you were the one that was giving the speech, so you weren't sitting in the audience where I was, but the applause were tremendous. What was impressive and frustrating at the same time were the comments about how salient and on point you were, and it's a shame that that was such a closed audience. I mean, those were your folks who either had positions in the party or were big donors to the party, and it was commented there. I am aware that there were those in leadership that made a point to tell others that your words that were shared before everyone that night before the RNC should be in a broader audience. So it was again a joy to hear you, but also frustrating at the same time that we knew it was close quarters.
Well, I appreciate that, Clarke. Text question from Ed is if Ron Paul wins the nomination, would you accept being the VP nominee? Actually, I believe Ron Paul has gone on record saying that his VP choice would be a pro-life candidate. Fundamentally, I believe in a woman's right to choose, and I respect anyone with a socially conservative agenda. I think the way you change people's lives is by living your life by example, and that's how you change other people's lives. But I think when you have government passing laws as to how you and I should live our lives, I think we find ourselves criminally liable for the way we live our lives, and that should be the last thing that government gets itself involved in. So I think Ron Paul himself has said that I'm not qualified to be VP because of my pro-choice stance. Brownsroth, I'm sorry, I'm definitely pronouncing this right, but wrong. But thoughts on the recent Rick Perry ad?
Yeah.
Clarke, maybe you can highlight that ad, because I've only heard it secondhand, and maybe you can repeat it, and I'll sure comment on it if it's as I heard secondhand.
I mean, if we redid it, one would think it was a parody off of The Onion or the Steve Colbert Show. The ad that's being referred to was one that ran earlier this week. Governor Perry, either under bad advisement counsel or his own bad decision, thought that he would tie in the war on Christmas with the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell and open service to the military. The ad was clearly designed to reach a target market in Iowa for the Iowa caucuses. From a tactical standpoint, it was very ham-fisted to think that an ad in this day and age with social media, where you can go online and do a dialogue on Yowie or Facebook or Twitter, that ad would stay in a media market in a small niche and not go all over the world. And let's face it, it actually was anti-conservative in its nature. He's supposed to be running for commander-in-chief. Governor, you're running for commander-in-chief. All the other candidates are running to be the president as well as commander-in-chief, and he came off sounding like he wanted to run as the theocrat-in-chief. It was a very divisive ad. And earlier you were talking about the challenge we have within the broader conservative movement of maintaining ranks and losing folks to the independent column. And an ad like that was a real distraction, is a distraction, and certainly if someone didn't already have issue with his message on the broader platform, it turned off a number of potential voters, and unfortunately added to the perception that some Republicans can be exclusionary and to the point of mean-spirited and irrelevant.
Clarke, I couldn't have said that any better, and I think what this just adds fuel to is my notion that if the Republican Party is going to nominate a candidate that's going to lead with a social conservative agenda, I don't think that Americans are going to buy that. I think Republicans are going to find themselves in a third-party kind of a situation. Look, Republicans need to concentrate on dollars and cents, and this ad lends itself to anything but that.
And that's when in Washington, at the top of this dialogue, next week, issue number 1 that Speaker Boehner is talking about is jobs, 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 and the economy. And here you have a contender competing against you going completely the opposite direction, which is not the bread and butter issues that Americans want to talk about.
Well, and you hit it on the head, too, that in the past, this may have been an ad that just went unnoticed by the rest of the country, but with media as it exists today, the internet, that no, this is not escaping anyone's attention. So move on to Moira. Moira, you're up.
Gary, how are you? Can you hear me?
I'm great, thank you.
Good, good.
Yes, thank you.
I'm all about your intrusion of government and personal liberties, but I also strongly believe that government needs to protect us from various ills, such as consumer greed. We need to protect our environment. We need to protect people from fraud, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you deal with that as a libertarian? What's your view on government regulation to really protect us?
Well, first of all, I agree with your premise. I agree with your premise that government should protect us from bad actors.
Yes.
And bad actors, individuals or groups or businesses, corporations that would do us harm, whether that's from a property standpoint or whether that's physical harm. As governor of New Mexico, there were polluters out there. There were. And if it wasn't for the EPA, if it wasn't for the government, they continue to be polluting to this day. I really believe, I said this as governor of New Mexico, I said that I thought I could cut government spending in New Mexico by 1/3 and that no one would have noticed the difference. When I talk about my promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013, I really believe that there's a 43% largesse built into virtually everything, that we still can deliver on those core essentials, in this case, government protecting us against those that would do us harm. And let's not be naive. There are individuals, groups, businesses that do us harm, and but for government, they would be unabated in that. So, being libertarian in nature, we can do this much more efficiently. That government is way overboard, and a 43% reduction really gets it in line with doing this more efficiently. Maura, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I did have a follow-up, only because I followed you in the Richardson administration in the state of New Mexico, and I know that the flat budgets and the pressure to keep them down has been a problem, and that some agencies are actually starved. And although yes, there is inefficiency, they are starved to the point that they cannot accomplish their mission.
Well, when I was governor of New Mexico, I'm going to argue that no agency got starved. That state employees went from 12,000 state employees while I was governor of New Mexico to 10,800, which I thought was really a testament to state government employees doing more with less.
But when you look at certain agencies like Human Services and the Child Support Organization, they really can't do enough because their caseloads are so high. So how do you reprioritize the programs that are doing, that we do need more staffing to, and deprioritize those that really are inefficient?
So, Moira, after I left office, Governor Richardson took the number of state employees from 10,800 to 16,500. There's been a 50% increase in state government employees over the last 8 years. And I think what you see right now are agencies starved for funding because of the largesse that it's been built in. I would just argue till the sun goes down and beyond that we were all about better government, and that without exception we delivered better products, better services, at better prices or even the same prices. And if you have any examples of where we didn't succeed, I'll be the first to fess up to that. I thought that for all the money that we put into education, which was one of my promises as governor of New Mexico, is that I was going to increase funding for education as a percentage of what the state spent, and I did that for 8 straight years, that for all of that money, by all measurements, education got just a little bit worse from year to year to year, which led to my advocacy for 6 straight years on behalf of school choice and school vouchers and bringing competition to public education. Jared, you're up.
Sir, again, another question. I think you just touched on it a little bit, but you know, back John Kennedy was pretty big back on education, and I think, you know, a lot of people haven't touched on that as a serious matter. So the country's focused on financial stability, and you know, the previous and prior wars in Iraq and the future with Iran. What are your thoughts, and what is your stance on education in this country today?
I think that the best thing that the federal government can do when it comes to education is to get out of education completely. The federal government right now gives every state about 11 cents out of every dollar that every state spends. But keep in mind, that's money that the state has sent to Washington, and now it's coming back, and it's coming back as a little less. But I think it's also important to recognize that although they give the states 11 cents out of every school dollar that they spend, it comes with about 16 cents worth of strings and mandates attached to it. So what the federal government says is we're giving you 11 cents, but you're going to have to accomplish A, B, C, D, E, F to get the 11 cents, when accomplishing A, B, C, D, E, F costs 16 cents or even more. So if we get the federal government out of education completely, and by the way, the Department of Education was established in 1979. This is a new phenomenon under Carter, not something that's been around for a long time. And give education back to the states, 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, that's exactly what we'll have happen, that we'll see some fabulous success. I think it'll be led by school choice initiatives, but that's just my own personal belief. But if we give education back to the states, that we'll see some fabulous success that'll get emulated. We'll also see some really some miserable failure that'll get avoided, but we're very competitive, and that's the model for the future, not Washington top down. Allison.
Hi, Gary.
Hey.
Gary, my question is, I'm concerned that my government does not relate to the people enough as far as a generation gap, perhaps. They just seem to be political politicians, and all they're after is the money and not for the people anymore. What are we going to do about that?
Well, your question here also says, do you believe term limits are the answer? And yes, I think term limits are the answer. The answer is that politics should be about citizen service. It shouldn't be about re-elected. And I happen to believe that the root of all evil are politicians that are going to save you and I from the terrorist threat, from the illegal immigrant, from drugs, from dying on the street, from being able to provide security into your old age, and that because we've done all this, so we have ourselves bankrupt, and that we're doing all of this in the name of politicians that want to get reelected. Enact term limits. You know what? That is a silver bullet, I think, when it comes to better public policy.
Hi, Governor. Building off a question from, I think, Moira a couple questions ago, on your 43% budget cut proposal, can you give us some more examples of your running the New Mexico agencies, how you cut spending there and improve services, and how you would translate that ethic into, once you're president, how would you run those agencies with almost half the money? Does that help?
Well, so the example that I cite is that Medicaid in New Mexico was absolutely runaway. So I had an insurance policy as governor of New Mexico. We did the math. what if we gave every single citizen in New Mexico that was on Medicaid, and this is health care for the poor, what if we gave every Medicaid recipient in New Mexico my health insurance policy as governor of New Mexico and paid the same amount of money that I was paying as governor of New Mexico to have a health insurance policy? Would we really save hundreds of millions of dollars, and would we actually be able to deliver better health care? We did. I think we could have taken that many steps further if I would have been able to oversee complete delivery of health care to the poor without any strings, without any mandates from the federal government. I believe that I could have overseen that with 43% less money. I think without exception that we can do this is based on my experience as governor of New Mexico. I privatized half the state's prisons, and I know there's a lot of criticism about privatizing prisons, but I did this, and apples to apples comparison, same goods and services for 2/3 of the cost. To me, that's good government. That's what government should be focused on, is better delivery of goods and services. And in my experience, this is very much something that can be accomplished.
Yay!
Yes.
Yes. Awesome. This is a great honor. So yeah, I am definitely a supporter of you and Dr. Paul. And I consider myself a free market advocate. I was wondering what your stance on Pagovian taxes were, like taxes on negative externalities, like smoking, things like that.
Well, I am advocating the fair tax. I am advocating throwing out the entire federal tax system. So if we enacted the fair tax, now this would be outside of what might be state and local taxes, but using marijuana as an example, marijuana would be subject to a 23% fair tax, 23% consumption tax. The fair tax, for those online right now, check it out, fairtax.org. I think it really is, as the name implies, it's fair. The more money you make, the more fair tax you'll pay, the more money you'll be incentivized to save. So the fair tax does away with income tax, corporate tax, withholdings from your payroll check, replaces it with a 23% consumption tax, which should end up to be cost neutral over a very short amount of time, because right now all goods and services theoretically contain a 23% tax that when you take away all existing federal tax, you're going to reduce the cost of a can of Coke from $1 to 80 cents. You're going to pay the 23%. It's going to end up to be cost neutral. That's the theory, and I happen to think that would actually take place. When it comes to American competitiveness abroad, if we can reduce the cost of goods and services by 23%, that's the answer to China. I'm a free market guy. Hey, tariffs, that's not something that we should be talking about at all. What we should be talking about are ways to make us competitive. I think the fair tax does that. Sean Mulville writes, Governor, I'm a lifelong Democrat. You'll be my first Republican vote. Can you estimate the cost of federal pot laws? By legalizing marijuana, I think the estimate is a $20 billion savings. That would be a combination of law enforcement, the courts and the prisons redirecting their resources, and the amount of money that would be raised from a tax on marijuana, which is estimated to be about half of that $20 billion. Michael.
Hi, Gary. How you doing?
Great.
Couple of quick questions. I'm really troubled by two things. One of them is the Defense Authorization Act that passed the Senate and the House and now is in conference committee and is headed to Obama's desk for signature, that basically allows the government to use the military to incarcerate any civilian in the U.S. or abroad indefinitely with no legal recourse. What are your thoughts on that as a candidate? And the other question is, how would you move to mute the impact of the Citizens United decision and what has basically evolved into a point where all three branches of government are compromised by the influence of money in politics? Really like you. I'm a lifelong Democrat, and you'll be my first vote as well. And I've changed registration to be able to vote for you in the primaries.
Well, the first part, the detainment of any U.S. citizen without charge, that's why we fought wars in this country. That's why this country was established. So I would veto that legislation, and I hope, based on my experience, that you would recognize I have no aversion at all to vetoing legislation. And then the Citizens United. I think this is having unintended consequence, which are these super PACs that are being allowed to run outside of the expenditures from the candidate, really uncontrolled. I think when it comes to campaign finance reform, I think the number one thing that's needed is just 100% transparency, which does not exist today. And I've said this tongue-in-cheek, I'll say it again. I think politicians should be required to wear jackets similar to NASCAR drivers with logos commensurate with the size of their donations on their jackets. And then you can look at the candidate very quickly and determine that, ooh, this is General Motors or whomever. Pfizer.
Very good. Thank you very much. We love you here in Colorado.
Raul, would you please run for Senate to raise your national profile? Raul, I'd be a terrible senator. I think that Congress remains a job that is commensurate on bringing home the bacon. And bringing home the bacon is the fact that we're borrowing and, for the most part, printing money to cover the 43 cents more per dollar that we're spending that we're not generating. So I don't want to contribute to the problem, and in my opinion, the Senate and the House are the culprits behind where we're at. So, Guy, we can see all of you on the camera. How's it going?
Welcome, Libertarian Party, Houston, Texas. All right.
All right.
Yeah. Governor Johnson, if fair tax passes, how can you be 100% certain that subsequent legislation passed by the Congress would not waive the requirement for the repeal of the 16th Amendment?
I don't think, I suppose you can't guarantee that, but that is part of the proposal, and that it's a very important part of the proposal. But there are no guarantees. That should be part of it, which is getting rid of repealing the 16th Amendment so that we cannot have an income tax, that being part of the equation for the fair tax. Thanks. Alvin.
Oh, hi, Governor. I live in UCLA, and I rent an apartment here, and I have a really nice Gary Johnson 2012 banner hanging on my patio. But my new property owner tells me that I have to take it down because it's not commonly accepted patio use. And he won't give me permission to have any kind of political banner. Would you come down here and talk to him?
You know, Alvin, thank you for putting up that banner, but I understand those rules, and if you know, in the notion of equality, if everybody in the building is having to comply with the same rules, you know, that's an okay thing. If there are other banners out there and you're not allowed to fly the Gary Johnson banner, but there can be other banners that fly, then that's not equality, and you know, that's where we have an issue. But thank you for flying the banner.
Well, how do you think this relates to corporations having more speech than me as an individual? Like, if I'm not allowed to hang a large banner saying what I believe politically, how does that affect the speech of individuals?
Well, no, I mean, I understand the notion that as an employer, that as long as I have a rule that says no one can put a bumper sticker on a company vehicle, then that's okay, as opposed to, well, if you're not going to do that, then you're going to have to allow for everyone to have a banner, and it's either all or none. But it's equality at the base of the decision needs to be equal treatment, and I think that's what we're really concerned with. That's what I'm really concerned with. I just want to be treated the same. Jared LaRock, text question: if elected, what would be your first act to cut spending in Washington? I promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. That is a document that will detail, and not that I don't do it now on the stump, but detail how to reduce existing government expenditure by 43%. I'm also promising to veto any legislation where expenses exceed revenue. I suggest to you, with those two promises, and that's me getting elected president, I think that's America shouting that we want a balanced budget and we're not going to take anything less. And I would hope people shout that, because that saves this country. That means we all have something going forward, as opposed to a monetary collapse. But I suggest to you that with those two promises, spending will be less than any other scenario that you can possibly come up with. That's with Congress overriding that veto. The spending will still be less in this scenario. Nevo, text question. Clarke, did you want to add?
I just say of course, very timely, considering the two-state solution that the previous administration had articulated, and there's been some back and forth amongst your colleagues within the Republican primary as to how to address our bilateral relationship with Israel, as well as dealing with the two-state solution with the Palestinians. So it's I think it's a very timely question, considering we just had the Republican Jewish Conference here in Washington earlier this week.
Well, and the question is, what's your policy toward Israel, such as their opinion on handling the question of Palestinian statehood? I've been to Israel. I've met with Netanyahu. I've met with Shimon Peres. I've met with Ariel Sharon. I think that it's a real mistake for us to believe that we have solutions to issues that really Israel, only Israel, should be and will be dealing with. Israel is an ally, will remain an ally, and I think it's a mistake for us to think that we're going to dictate to them actions when it comes to Palestinian statehood. It's just a mistake on our part. It's not reality. They're the ones that have to deal with this, and they will. Jimmy writes. So Jimmy, the flat tax started out as something very, very, income tax started out as a flat tax and no deduction. Sounds great, but I think what you're going to have is you're going to have a return to where we were. The fair tax is not unfair to you because, and I would ask you to get online and check it out, fairtax.org. But what the fair tax does is it will give you a $200 a month prebate check. It'll give every citizen in the country a $200 a month prebate check. So it's going to give you $2,400 a year, which is going to enable you and all of us to pay an unavoidable amount of fair tax for a minimum amount of goods and services up to the point of the poverty level. So it's not regressive in that everyone receives this prebate check to be able to pay the fair tax up to the point of the poverty level. Well, it would come out of fair tax revenue, yes. And I just, if you're below the poverty level, you're going to find yourself spending $2,400 a year on the fair tax because you're going to have to purchase a minimal amount of goods, food, clothing, shelter, but that gets covered for all of us up to the point of the poverty level. So the fair tax escapes the criticism of being unfair to the poor. Ed Lee, text question. Would you pardon all federal nonviolent drug offenders? Yes. And I did this as governor of New Mexico. What I did in New Mexico is I said that anybody that's in jail for just drug use only, that I would actually commute that sentence. I only found 2 individuals in all of state prison that qualified for that, and I did commute their sentences. But when it came to pardoning nonviolent drug offenders in New Mexico, in this case, these were offenders who had actually carried out their sentences, whether that was actual time in jail or probation or whatever. We set up a criteria for nonviolent drug offenders to get pardoned, and this is not official, but I think I issued hundreds of those pardons for individuals who had committed these nonviolent crimes, who had served their sentences, and had clean records since. And yes, this does need to be a part of the federal equation when it comes to drugs. I think we have millions of Americans that, but for our drug laws, would otherwise be tax-paying, law-abiding citizens, but now carry felony convictions.
So, Governor, these are very tight parameters you're talking about. This is for, as you said, someone who has maybe been caught using a substance, not selling, dealing, or attributed to any kind of other link to crime, but really tight parameters as far as what's forgivable, so to speak.
Yes, and back to nonviolent, and we included sale in this also, and by sale there were individuals that sold drugs that had, and I maintain that the drug pusher is a very misunderstood concept. That for the most part, the drug pusher is yesterday's drug user that's now being thrust into the selling role because the seller has been caught and is serving jail time. We've become very, very good in this country at arresting and convicting individuals that sell drugs, small amounts of drugs. Christopher Benfer has a text question. What is your stance on gun owners' rights, including concealed carry laws? In New Mexico, running for governor of New Mexico, at that time concealed carry was really a cutting-edge issue. This was back in 1994. I thought that concealed carry laws would lead to less gun violence. I said that in my campaign, and I was able to sign legislation in New Mexico authorizing concealed carry. When it comes to gun owners' rights, I don't think the Constitution could be any clearer. I am not the guy that's going to legislate a reduced number of bullets in the clip. Whenever I hear situations of gun violence, I always take the view that, gee, if there was just somebody out there that was concealed carrying and had enough bullets in their clip to combat the assault that we read about, the assaults that we read about, that's the way that these issues could be dealt with. So again, I don't think the Constitution could be clearer with regard to gun rights.
As a district resident, I'm a gun owner and a D.C. resident. Wanted to back up where Christopher had come in, is that states where conceal and carry has been not legal, or even gun ownership has been limited or not available in certain urban areas, DC being one, the crime rates are higher because the chance of mitigating any crime, the criminals aren't stupid. They may make some dumb errors and mistakes and tactical errors, but they know that basically the terrain is theirs. They own the terrain. If they're not going to be met with on par or a greater force. And so, New Mexico, Texas, Florida, Alaska, states where conceal and carry has been addressed or are available at any given time, the stats are there to support it.
Listen, I want to thank everyone. Clarke, I want to thank you for being online. I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening, and we're going to end the broadcast. I think we're going to run one more little clip. I would implore all of you to get online, GaryJohnson2012.com, and donate $1. Donate that cup of coffee, if you will, and we'll keep this message going. Thank you all so much for being here this evening. Clarke, thank you again. Thank you.
Green chilies. Now it's official.